for the folks online. But it is a small room, so I hope we'll all get cozy together. My name is Heidi Frail, and I am the chair of the Tree Preservation and Planning Committee. We're going to call this meeting to order, and then we'll get started with our presentation. So, calling to order the Tree Preservation Planning Committee meeting for Wednesday, November 19th. And Gabby, do we have anyone of our committee online? Okay. So then we're all here. So that's enough of that. So thank you guys for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. I know there's been a lot of, and this goes out to the online audience as well. I know there's been a lot of public hearings this week. So we appreciate your presence here. And we appreciate you participating in this issue. This is an especially important public forum because we are using your feedback tonight to vet our ideas and to see really what you think of them so that we can continue to use them as planning for our potential bylaw. So the format for tonight is that we're going to make a very short presentation. We're going to introduce the committee and talk about what we've been doing. Next slide. And then we're going to open the mic and just hear from you about the concepts that we've put out to you and hopefully your questions and comments and ideas, okay, so that we can continue to use them. Tonight's, the committee's purpose is, as you can see, to review options for preserving the town's tree canopy, both public and private, and to make recommendations for action to the select board. Tonight's goal is to evaluate. So we're going to focus on one part of our committee charge, which you can see on our website. And that is to evaluate and recommend changes to the rules and regulations and policies and bylaws that to implement tree preservation strategies. There are a whole host of other things that the tree committee will be working on. These are educational options. These are other recommendations beyond a bylaw. And you can see all of those charges at our website. Sounds like we're maybe having a problem with our presentation. So I'm just going to pause for 1 sec here. While we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the committee who's put in so much work here. So I'm Heidi Frail. I'm a member of the select board, and that's my role on the committee. And I'm going to just read off the other members, and maybe if you guys can give a wave when I say your name. Clary Coutu, who's a member of the Conservation Commission. Artie Crocker, who's not here with us tonight, is a member of the Planning Board. Fred Motor, member of the Climate Action Committee. Josh Levy is a select board member who is here on the committee as a member of the Stormwater Bylaw Working Group. The Stormwater Bylaw was passed by town meeting. Oscar Mertz, member of the Large House Review Study Committee. Nick Tatar is one of our local builders. Kurt Petrini is a local developer. Erica Bond is a landscape architect, master gardener. Erica Hitchings, resident at large, and Andrew Bobinski is a resident at large. And then we also have our 2 members of staff, Ed Olson, who's a certified arborist and superintendent of parks and forestry, and Gabby Queenan, who is our web guru at the moment, but is also our sustainability manager for the town. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty, so we're just going to sit tight for a sec so the folks online can see what we are seeing. Is it here? I have a lot of sympathy for this. I spend my entire day on Zoom. Hooray.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, team. Okay, things are resolved. We're hoping that the folks online can now see where we are. So we'll just keep going. Sorry for the glitch, but we haven't missed anything really important. So one of the things that this committee is trying to do is to create a bylaw to regulate private trees. And this little diagram is just showing you kind of the major milestones that we've gone through. We had our first meeting in March of 2025. We had our first public listening session in June. We're now at our public forum in November. We are hoping to turn a formulated bylaw over to the select board around May for public hearings from the select board, and then go to a an October special town meeting in 2026. All right. So we've already looked at the committee. So let's skip to the next slide and we'll talk about the goal for the evening. So the goal for the evening is to gather feedback, as I mentioned, on the foundational concepts that we are using to create the tree bylaw that will help shape Needham's approach to tree preservation. And while doing so, we want to raise awareness of this committee and our work, trees and Needham generally, and of course, to answer any questions that we can, and any questions that come up during this time that we're talking about, we're going to be collecting. If we can't answer tonight, then we will collect all the information and make an FAQ document so that we'll eventually get those questions answered. But there are a lot of unanswered questions at this moment, things that we are still investigating. So to date, the committee has been doing a good deal of research, a good deal of education and level setting so that we all understand sort of the basic concepts and how not only trees work within our environment, but also how bylaws work. We have reviewed a good deal of prior work done by the town manager's working group, as well as previous goes at a tree bylaw for this town. We've reviewed tree preservation strategies in 17 similar communities. We've been really focusing on Wellesley's tree bylaw, which we've found to be very compatible with our community. We've reviewed the DCR guide to local trees. We've been looking at state law. We did hold a public listening session, one that was really just geared to understand the concerns of the community. We've reviewed legal considerations with our town council. We've had Kurt Petrini did a great presentation of the development process so that we could understand where there were gaps that the town needed to take care of. We've reviewed the process of the building department going through the permit issuing process. And then we did a great educational and publicity event at the 2025 Harvest Fair. All right, and I'm going to hand it over to the co-chair, Erica Bond, to walk us through those foundational concepts.
Thank you, Heidi. Before we talk about some of the foundations of the bylaw, we thought we would spend a little bit of time just reviewing some of the values that we place in trees, both intrinsic and more things that you can measure and touch and feel. Intrinsic values include things like the aesthetic values of tree, the emotional and mental health benefits, the neighborhood characteristics that mature trees especially bring, a sense of place. You know, when you see an oak tree or a sugar maple in fall glory, you think of New England, for instance. Historically, trees have been, before we had air conditioning, for instance, houses were sited so that they would take advantage of trees for cooling and heating benefits. Large deciduous trees were placed along the south and the west sides of a house so that they would shade the sun in the summer and keep the house cool. And in the winter, when they dropped their leaves, the sun would get into the house and warm it up, where evergreens would be placed along the north side of the house to provide a windbreak in the wintertime. So trees have been, an important part of our world here for a very long time. They also support local habitat, and in today's world, they provide an important benefit of reducing or controlling some of the air pollutants. For instance, trees along the roadsides can reduce air pollutants by approximately 30%. And in urban parks and forestry, they reduce the energy demand by nearly 10%. That's a little bit of what I was getting to before. Next slide. They also, in learning how to measure some of the values of trees in terms of their carbon sequestration and their ability to help us manage stormwater runoff. Like for an impervious surface, when it rains, all the stormwater just runs off and then into our sewers and pollutes our streams. But when there's mature trees and with a pervious surface, it filters down through the soil and eventually ends up back into the atmosphere. There's some data from the Sustainable Needham Climate Action Roadmap of 2024 that in Needham, where we have 4,114 acres of trees, that has the ability to sequester over 469,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide, which is equal to about the energy use for about 59,000 homes. So now that we're able to start measuring some of the value of trees, it's even more important that we recognize them. Next. So it's also important to recognize that Needham has a great legacy of trees. The picture on the left here is actually of two of our committee members, Ed Olson and Kurt Petrini. And here they are, Kurt is a developer and Ed is our tree warden. And they are in front of a house on Warren Street that was recently built, and they have planted a tree together. So it's a partnership. Needham partners with our forestry department partners with homeowners and developers to try to get more trees planted. In this case, it was a very small lot, but they found a native tree in a cultivar that's a columnar form that fits perfectly on that small lot. So that's a great example of a partnership. Needham is also designated as a Tree City USA town by the Arbor Society, Arbor Day Society, Arbor. Yeah, with that. Anyway, so, and some of our tree programs date back to the early 1900s. For instance, our planting records go back to 1938. We've been tracking them since then. And we've been doing educational programs for decades. Okay, move on. So let's talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish with this bylaw. In general, we want to try to preserve as much of Needham's private tree canopy as possible while still representing the priorities of our community. We don't want to do anything that's going to be overly cumbersome or difficult to implement for developers and builders and homeowners, for that matter. And we really have decided that we can't really tackle every single issue, every single situation where trees are cut down in this town. So we wanted to focus on the situations that town people seem to be most concerned about, and that seems to be the clear cutting of lots when new houses go up. So we are not, we're just looking to put in place a more thoughtful approach to that situation. Next slide. So let's first talk about what area of a lot we're talking about, for instance. One of the first things you need to decide is, if we're going to try to protect trees, are we going to try to protect all the trees? Are we just, are we going to establish, measurements? Are we just gonna, you have to like have some kind of parameters. So our committee has decided, in looking at some of the other towns, that what makes the most sense is to try to protect the trees that are already in an unbuildable zone within, our lots already. So that really kind of corresponds to what's currently in our zoning in the setbacks, so that anything that's not within the setbacks isn't considered a protected tree. That doesn't mean we want people to go cut them down. That doesn't mean that we want, that's what we're interested in. We would love people to preserve those trees as much as possible, but it's just not an area that we're focusing on with this bylaw. Now, when we talk about protection, we don't mean prohibition. What we mean is that protection is really a matter of three different principles: preserving wherever possible and practical. Where it's not possible or practical, there are other options, such as replacing or mitigating by, if a tree is cut down, then there could be a mitigation schedule to make sure that like a contribution is made into a tree revolving fund, for instance, that could then be used to plant trees somewhere else in town. So that the net is that our tree canopy is not continuing to decline every year. So we haven't, so again, these are just foundational concepts here, but we've also talked about the situations in which the bylaw would actually sort of get triggered or go into effect. And that wouldn't be every single, situation. It would really only be in one of these cases. So for instance, if somebody is going to take out a demolition permit, or they're going to take out a permit, they want to do a new construction permit, or they want to do an addition that's results in an increase of the building footprint of more than 25%, or they want to put in a large pool or a large patio, then that would necessitate that a tree protection plan be part of the permitting process. What that means is that it would apply to only the trees that are within the tree yard, as we've previously discussed, that are currently in that setback area, and only trees of a particular size. So not every single tree within the area is considered protected. What it doesn't mean is that a homeowner or a developer cannot cut down trees, and that they cannot take down, individual trees that are diseased or in danger. They do not have to pay or, have to consider those protected and pay into the mitigation plan for taking down trees like that. There are other instances in which the bylaw would not apply. These are just some of them. Just to summarize, trees that are considered hazardous, that a certified arborist would say, that's a hazardous tree. It's diseased or infested. If a property is in the wetlands protection zone, then that overrides the tree bylaws. Public trees, for instance, are already protected under our tree with a state law and enforced by our tree warden. And then there are always going to be emergency projects for public safety, health, and welfare. And again, our tree warden already does that now and will continue to do so. I'm going to pass the mic back to Heidi. She's going to talk about some other things.
Okay, so you've heard a lot. I think that slide with the purple ring around the little house was the most important one. That is the area that we're talking about calling the tree yard, and it aligns with the existing setbacks. So a setback in zoning speak is a place where you cannot build anyway. So these are areas that wouldn't necessarily need clearing in a clear cut in a new construction context because you're not going to build anything there anyway. There are, however, a bunch of other matters that are open and that we would love to hear your thoughts on. And so I'm going to bring those up now. Erica talked a lot about mitigation of trees. So your option is to protect and preserve a tree, or you can replace a tree. If it needs to be cut down, you can replace it, or you can mitigate it. And mitigating means paying for it. So we as a committee are going to be working out a formula for what the value of a tree is. And that means not how much does it cost to take it down, but what does that tree represent in terms of health, air pollution, stormwater mitigation, and so on. What is the value of that tree to the community in which it lives? And if we take it down, how do we monetize that so that we can pay for other trees to be put in elsewhere to sort of balance out the removal of that tree? That's what mitigation means. So we have still to work out what that formula would be to find the value of a tree. That's something we're going to be working on. And then translating that into a fee. So something that you would pay into a fund. We have yet to work out the process and the costs of implementation and enforcement. So we're thinking already about who is going to be keeping track of all these processes. Likely it'll be the building department as new plans are coming in for new construction. We have talked a lot about site plans that would include placement of trees and certain types of trees so that we could keep track of them and understand what was there to start with and what's going to be there at the end of the process. And we have still to talk about a lot of special circumstances and exemptions. So we know that there will be conflicts with the zoning bylaw, even though generally speaking, we talk about the setback area as something where you can't build anything. There are exceptions to that. A person could build, say, a shed in their backyard and place that a whole lot closer to the lot line than they could a house, for example. So if you were deciding to put in a shed and you needed to remove a tree in order to do that, we want to make sure that once we write this bylaw, that there aren't conflicts with other bylaws. The new ADU bylaw is another one of those that we're going to have to get more information on and work on so that ADUs, which are now allowed by right by the state, do not present a conflict with this general bylaw. And then also there's a concept, and probably Ed would say this much more concisely, but when you talk about the tree, you need to consider the root system, which goes quite a ways away from the trunk of the tree underground. And so when we talk about the setback area, there will be some conflict with roots coming out into the yard, and we're going to have to find a way to resolve those incidences where the tree is maybe too close to the setback line to be comfortable chopping it off right there. In addition, utility space considerations. So we know that some of our lots, especially in our smaller lot districts like the SRB, a lot of times don't have a lot of frontage. There's a lot of work coming across the sidewalk, then maybe we don't have enough room for everything in our front setback, as an example. So we're going to be working on resolving all of those conflicts and potential exemptions. We're also looking at incentives to help homeowners and builders comply with this law because we want to make it easy and we want to make it clear so that people understand what's expected of them and that it doesn't take a lawyer to read this bylaw. But we're interested in hearing other thoughts that you might have, other things that might have occurred to you that have not yet occurred to us so that we can make sure to cover all of our bases when we're looking at this bylaw. So very shortly, in a moment, we'll get to the point where you guys we'll open the floor and we'd like to hear from you. I will just say, generally speaking, the way public comment works in these situations is that we ask you to state your name and address so that we can record it for the minutes. There's not that many people here. I'm not sure that we're going to have a problem with our 3-minute limit, but we do want to be respectful and give everyone a chance. So if you have a lot of things to say the most important things up front, and then when everyone else is done, you can have a second turn at the microphone. We want to speak nicely to each other. This can be an oddly emotional issue, but we want to be nice to each other because we're all neighbors. We'll be answering any questions that we can as we go, and the answers that we can't provide tonight, we will compile and bring back to you. We do have a number of educational engagements that we'd like to invite you to. They're not really planned in their entirety just yet, so we can't be too specific, but we are planning to have a presentation by the Charles River Watershed Association on not only regional tree planting and protection, but specific to Needham. The Charles River Watershed has just done and is closing out a study on water and trees in the area that includes Needham, and it'll be full of really interesting information. The Needham Public Library is going to do a tree-themed table. I don't know if you've seen their displays of books, but it should be a really interesting display. And then we're working on some garden tours. More to come on that, but hopefully we can feature some eco-friendly yards that have a lot of the features that really sustain environments. So the best way to find out about all these things is to sign up for the Notify Me for this committee. That'll share with you anytime there are new minutes or a new agenda packet, so you can follow our progress. And you can do this from the town website. And just an FYI, you can do it for any issue that interests you. Hopefully you'll do it for trees, but there's all kinds of things going on in town. And this is a great way to get notified when something is happening about an issue that you care about. In the meantime, you can always email us. The email address for this committee is OTM, that's Office of the Town Manager, OTM@needhamma.gov. And you can go well past your 3-minute limit on your emails. So feel free to sound off in that way. And so lastly, we do have a website. It's part of the town website. It's the TPPC. One of the nice things that we do on this website that Gabby does for us is little meeting summaries. So you can see at a glance kind of what we talked about in our last meeting and the meeting before that and the meeting before that. So you can kind of keep up with all the activities without having to go through the torture of reading our minutes. So I encourage you to visit the website. And with that, we'll open it up. If you have any thoughts on what you've seen so far or questions, come on up to the mic.
Good evening. My name is Jim Glickman from 24 Colton Park. First, thank you all for the work that you're doing. It's very important. I have a couple of quick questions. First of all, on one of your slides, you talked about 4,100 acres in Needham as the tree canopy at present. I'm wondering has that been constant in the last several years? Is it decreasing? My second question is, with the 3 options, the third of them is the mitigation. So obviously the first 2 options of protect and replace they're good options. They protect the canopy. I'm a little concerned about the mitigation because I'm wondering if it just becomes a cost of doing business that the builder absorbs or passes on to the buyer. And if that ends up happening a lot, and the mitigation is chosen by many builders in a lot of situations, there wouldn't be the same effect, I I'm fearful on the tree canopy. Now, I guess the devil's in the details. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about payment into a fund. So if you're taking down a big mature tree, you're not going to plant a big mature tree, I would assume. Maybe it's several trees to equal that. So I'm just wondering how the mitigation aspect would work, because I am a little concerned about it.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Just
Um,
introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Fred Motor. The Charles River Watershed Association did a geographic systems inventory, GSI study of towns in the Charles River watershed. Needham is entirely in the Charles River watershed. And they compared canopy cover in 2008 with the canopy cover in 2021. They estimated at the end of that period that Needham had 50% canopy cover and had lost 5.5% over that period of 13 years. That comes to about 18 acres per year on average lost during that time period. What we don't know is whether there's an acceleration or deceleration or what the trajectory really is. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
And maybe Ed, do you think that you could speak about mitigation and at least what we are currently doing, the tree revolving fund now, and then
Sure.
what-
So most communities that have a tree bylaw have that same option: replant, save, protect, replant, or pay into a fund. You can't prohibit entirely not taking trees down. I think by right, you have that right. You just have these options. Wellesley, that fund goes to public works projects where they plant trees, they build paths, try to save the environment. So I think your concern is valid. I think it may become the cost of doing business, but again, that cost is given to the town to have an obligation, I think, to replant with those funds and invest back into the urban canopy. Right now, those funds, they don't exist. So it's just a loss. So I do understand your concern, and I don't think we can really prevent that at this time.
May I have a quick follow-up?
Yeah, let me just add to that we also are working to establish a replacement size. So if you take down a tree that is, 10 inches diameter at breast height, which is the measurement that we typically use, you would have to replace it with a certain number of trees, like the same number of inches. And while intuition tells you that the bigger the better, our tree warden tells us that in fact, the optimum size of tree to replant is 1.5 inches, right, Ed? Those are the ones that are most likely to survive. And so we're going to be putting together sort of a combination package. So you could replace some trees, you could mitigate some trees, you could preserve some trees. It's not a binary option.
I see. That's very helpful. And just one last comment. This fund that the developers will be paying into, I think that's a good idea. And I hope that's something that's open to the public. So if people want to simply make a donation to a tree fund, that is an option for everybody, not just in the developer situation. Thank you very much.
The other thing that discourages too much tree cutting is that most towns have an accelerating formula for the coefficient, for the multiplier cutting a large tree down, you pay more per inch than you do for cutting a narrower tree. And so there is that disincentive.
I see that we have some hands online, so we're going to just kind of bounce back and forth, assuming there are more folks in both places. So we'll start with Ellen Fine. So we're bringing you over, Ellen, and just remember to unmute yourself and then introduce yourself. Hi, Ellen, we see you, but you're on mute.
Okay, here we go. Can you see me and hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm really happy that this is happening. Sadly, for so many of us with all these concerns, probably about 10 or 15 years too late, but really honestly better late than never. I just wanted to recount a story that I think will give some insight as to why some of it might be happening. Not necessarily on, we're going to clear the lot for brand new house, but we had some younger folks living next door who, like, I woke up one morning and they were taking down some of the most gorgeous trees I'd ever seen, like double masted oaks, not hanging over lines, not hanging over the house, not at all appearing to be diseased. And I'm like, why? So I'm just kind of really encouraging us to look at those kinds of situations as well. And also when we're thinking of the trees that we're going to be replacing, as we all know, an 80, 100, 200-year-old mature tree is not the same thing as a sapling that goes in. And I'm really, many of you know, I am involved with permaculture and all sorts of things like that, regenerative ag. And I think it's like super important that we really consider the quality and how the tree is grown that goes in. Something that is grown, by a place that uses a lot of chemical pesticides and neonics and things like that, is not the same as a well-grown permaculture sapling by somebody who's really put a lot of care into it. And I would be more than willing, and I'm going to suggest to the committee overall that you reach out to folks in the community on a continual basis for some of our resources that we can pass on to you, and maybe to open up some of these meetings, not just in a 3-minute public comment way, but in a like, let's really discuss this issue and let's really have everybody and more people be at the table. So that the committee is doing an amazing job, but it's just to kind of broaden that out. I know a lot of folks in town who are either landscape designers, land care professionals, who are doing like really good organic land care, regenerative land care. And I think that that would be really wonderful to add already to the expertise that you have there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ellen. Does anyone in the room want to say anything?
Hi, Les Kalish, 48 Lake Drive. I'm wondering if you've considered a scenario where, for example, a house is torn down and so I forgot what you called it, the tree yard is sort of in effect is protected. But after the new house has gone up and let's say a year later, is there anything to prevent an owner to clear cut what was in that protected area?
Actually is. Does anybody feel like they want to address the look back that we've discussed? So what we've talked about, you want to give,
I think, I'm not sure, I think the look back, so one scenario is a little bit of the opposite to start with, just to set the idea of the before and after, right? So there's an obvious concern that if somebody knows the lot is more attractive to a builder or developer, if the trees are already down, and that wouldn't affect, and then they wouldn't have to pay into a fund in theory. So that would be problematic and undercut the bylaw in the first place, right? And so people would clear cut in theory and then sell. And then if you didn't have a look back period. So the look back period that we are borrowing in some, at least in theory, from other bylaws kind of addresses at least the reverse of that as a starting point, right? So you can't, when the developer or somebody is submitting for the permit, it will have to kind of track the trees that were there for a period of time, and also that they have to survive. Is it a certain, we're thinking of a 2-year period. So it wouldn't, I don't think, although this is an interesting topic and why we've talked a little bit about it, whether or not it would, 2.5 years after somebody, had submitted for the building permit, whether that landowner could just clear a tree that is in the tree yard. But it does at least hopefully address any gamesmanship that is around that, and addresses the issue of clearing it simply to make it easier for trucks and other things to come on. But I do think we've debated that a little bit, and it kind of falls, and I think one topic that Heidi can address is what's the balance of which problems are we addressing? Because is that any different than somebody who's been in the house for 20 years deciding that there's a tree they want to take down, or all of the trees that are in the tree yard, even if they're not going to sell in the next 2 years?
Right. So
I think.
we've talked about that first portion that Erica mentioned, the 1 year look back, and that's at the beginning of the process to make sure that the homeowner didn't cut down the trees themselves prior to selling. And then also, once the construction is over and there's been a tree mitigation plan and the developer or the builder, whoever, the homeowner, has put in the new trees that were required or that they promised to put in, depending on what that plan incorporated, there's a problem of just transmitting that information to the new buyer potentially. And so we've been talking about ways to do that, and we're not quite clear on how that's going to work yet, but it is something that we're considering because it is a real issue. So does that answer your question, Les? I can see that you're standing and waiting. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Dave Roberts, 55 Bradford Street. And I had a follow-up to the question the gentleman asked. I wasn't aware of the look back, so that's great you are all considering that. If I own a home and I know it's the home's going to get scraped, then my incentive is to cut all the trees beforehand and do the dirty work of whoever might develop it. So what is the disincentive then? Like, so if there is a look back, is it just the same amount of money that gets paid into the fund, or is there a penalty for trying to evade the rules?
That's a good question. I don't think that we have an answer to that, but we will put it on our list.
Great. And then I have one more if I still have time.
Of course.
Did you all consider, and I'm new to this, and thank you all very much for all your hard work on this, and it's a great issue. Did you consider a heritage tree program for Needham?
Say more about a heritage tree program.
Some communities designate trees, a finite number of trees in their town as like special for whatever reason, maybe their size, maybe their location, maybe there's historical significance. I know that there are towns around the country that do this, and I didn't know if there could be a heritage tree program overlay where this gets into weird property rights stuff, but where if it's outside of the setback, in other words, within the buildable lot, but it's a heritage tree, maybe you can't take it down, or maybe an owner who cares about trees can designate their own tree, a heritage tree. And then, if I'm going to sell my home, it's probably, maybe it's worth less, maybe it's not, maybe it's worth more. But I'm just curious, going back to the root level question, if you've considered heritage trees.
Well, we haven't, but that's another one they're going to add to our list.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. I see that we have someone online, Jane Volden. We're going to bring you over, and just remember to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, can you hear me? All right.
Yep, we can.
Hi, this is Jane Volden. I live at 133 Brookside Road, and I just had a couple questions regarding the mitigation. First of all, I know you said that you haven't determined, the specific cost, but I'd kind of like to know, what realm are you talking about? If you have like a large oak tree that's taken down, are you talking $50, $500, or $5,000 as a mitigation cost? Just rough number. The second thing I'm concerned, a question about the mitigation, or if you don't want to mitigate, but if you want to replace, is the homeowner able to replace it with the type of tree that they want to replace it and not just beholden to a recommendation by the town. And the third thing I just wanted to comment is I just get a little concerned about, you know, the cost and all the administrative overhead about all these mitigation things. And it seems like, over time, what are you going to have to hire a full-time person to take care of this? Then you have all the overhead of paying the person's benefits, retirement, healthcare, et cetera, and it can get really expensive. So I'm just wondering, what are you going to do to make sure that this mitigation doesn't get totally out of control as far as cost is concerned?
Sure. Good question. Thanks, Jane. We have been looking at the associated labor costs. It's something that we're kind of collecting as we move through this process. I think we've been actually quite sensitive in data collection to what the burdens might be to the different departments, and in fact have just sent out a memo to all of the town departments that could potentially be impacted by such a bylaw, so that they could have some impact, have an opportunity to tell us what the impact would be on their department, so that we could scrape all that information together and figure out what the administrative burden would be. We are trying to work within existing systems so that we don't, have to create new ones that would be expensive or time consuming for the existing employees. But it is true that there will be some cost associated with this, and it's something that we're going to calculate and publicize as part of the bylaw. I would say, regarding your question about tree replacement choice, I know that we have a list of trees that are prohibited for replacement because they're not native or they're prone to disease. Ed,
They're
maybe you could,
invasive.
or invasive, thank you.
species.
We have real experts on this panel. So I was actually going to say maybe one of you could speak to the realm of choice for replacement.
At this moment, we want to put the burden on the builder and a certified arborist. We want the certified arborist to attest to plans, to verify plans, and to stand by them. So we don't want to be designing landscapes for developers. We want them to hire an expert. We want to review those plans, comment, and keep this flowing. So again, it was never the intent to tell people what trees to plant, other than we will make sure that they're not planting anything on the state's invasive tree list. But that was not the intent, was to micromanage what choices they make. They have to live by these choices. I think another good comment is mitigation by replacing trees. Again, we mentioned big oaks. So we know large trees are going to come down, and to mitigate, you're going to need a lot of little trees to come up with the big tree. So we also want to make sure developers aren't shoehorning in dozens of trees that are basically going to overtake each other and die out. So I think some of that will be within the review process to make sure that these plans that are presented are logical and feasible to actually enact. Going back 1 second to the question previously about heritage trees, there is a heritage tree program. It's administered by Massachusetts Department of Conservation Resources. I'm not aware of any recognized heritage tree by the state of Massachusetts that's in this town. That's not to say we can't come up with our own criteria. When I think heritage trees, I think of the Newman oak tree, that we have a specialized program that takes care of that tree, because in my heart, in mind of mine, it's one of the trees that we should be proud of and protect. But I just wanted to make clear, the town no town determines heritage trees as it stands in Massachusetts today. That's a state determination. There's a big process, and I'm not aware of any trees in Needham that are recognized by the state's heritage tree process. Thank you.
And I don't want to forget about Jane's question regarding the mitigation cost. I don't have a cost offhand that I could throw out to you, but I would suggest that it is done by a formula. So the cost is kind of the size of the tree that you're taking down, divided by other factors that tells you what the cost of that tree would be. And part of that is what we haven't yet determined. Other towns have varying formulas, and some of them are really expensive and some of them are much less so. And we we need to take a look at that, but we haven't yet. So I can't quite answer that, but it is something that we're thinking about. Go ahead, come on up.
Hi, I'm Olivia Herlock. I live at 100 Edgewater Drive. I want to echo everyone's thanks for all that you're doing. It's very important for our town. I have a few questions. The first of which is, I apologize for not knowing this, but all of these bylaws would be triggered if there's construction. So for instance, someone who's lived in her house for 30 years can just decide to cut down some trees and that there's no control over that. That's correct?
That is true.
Yes, okay. My next question has to, I'm circling back to the mitigation. And one thing that I would request that you consider as part of that is the stormwater component. Because as you know, if a lot is clear cut, all your neighbors' basements fill with water often. I've seen that happen. And a third question is, anyway, I'm sure that's part of your formula, but because it's a big problem, and that's happened in my neighborhood more than once. Regarding the certified arborists that developers use, is there any sort of approved list, or we have had a couple of instances, I've seen a couple of instances of arborists reports. They conveniently report that everything is diseased or dangerous, and I can't find any accreditation for that arborist anywhere. So if that is something that can be monitored as well, I think that would be helpful and important in making sure that what the information is that it's accurate. So
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I can take the accreditation. So there's two
Yeah.
accreditations: International Society of Arboriculture, which is what I am, ISA certified international, or Massachusetts certified arborist. So two. And there's bad actors in every profession. However, there's an obligation when you become a certified arborist. You don't lie, you don't make up stories, because you can lose your license. So yeah, there's some bad players out there, but I assure you there's not many out there. Thank you.
Come on up.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Rob Brayman. I live at 76 Lawton Road. Want to echo all the thanks. As you know, I've attended the majority of your meetings, either in person or online. And I understand that the work you all are doing far exceeds the minor attendance that I have done. I want to recap my concern. I know it's forefront in a lot of minds already, but I want to recap my concern from the previous public forum that, primarily concerned with homeowner rights and the fact that people who have wooded lots now, that the work you all do could unjustly punish us or put a burden on us, a cost on us for having done the right thing already. I've started taking an inventory of trees on my lot, and just in my front yard, I have 3 oaks, ranging in diameter from about 23¼ inches to just under 30 inches. That 30-inch tree would require a 45-foot critical root zone by the formulas that have been discussed in the past, or that are in the draft bylaw you're working on. At a 45-foot critical root zone for me to protect if I wanted to put an addition on my house or something, that would not only encounter my whole front yard, it would go all the way through to my backyard. Not only would it do that, it would go into my neighbor's yard. I don't mean my direct abutting neighbor. I mean my neighbor across the street. The critical root zone would be all the way through the street and onto the other side. I'm pretty, 90% sure. I haven't measured that one. So I find myself in this awkward position of being very much in favor of trees, doing the right thing, and very much at risk of having costs, like significant cost. If, you know, if you use the Wellesley formulas, I think we're talking thousands of dollars for me to mitigate a tree. You know, I realize that's not, the Wellesley formula isn't your formula, but, you know, but it's a significant cost. Yes, you're not saying nobody can do it, but you are saying you with the trees will have significant costs. You have to hire arborists, you have to pay mitigation fees. You talk about the value of a tree and in regards to how much would a tree, like how much is the town losing if that tree gets cut down? What value to the town is lost? And I guess what I'd say is by regulating, what value to the homeowner are you taking effectively by eminent domain? Without actually going through the eminent domain procedure. Yeah, so I have so much that I would love to talk about, but a few other just brief points I'll make. You know, I do want to note, you know, you have a great representation of people on the committee, but the one voice you don't have, I would say, is somebody whose primary interest is in preserving property rights along with tree protection. It comes up from time to time in your meetings that, oh, don't forget, we can't, you know, we have to present this to a wider body. But the gravity of all of the discussion every meeting is very much protect more, do more, every tree is good. And then as sort of an afterthought, oh, wait, but we, you know, remember that guy who talked at the last meeting? Yeah, so, and then, you know, I think about Needham as a town, right? My daughter went to a school called Broad Meadow, right? That didn't get the name because it was a wooded neighborhood. You know, the major road through town is Great Plain Avenue, right? These, you know, if you look at, in 1950, the town did they started doing pictures of every property. I don't know if it's the Board of Assessors or whoever, but it's available online. It's at the library as well. If you look at your house, your neighbor's houses, all sort, the town probably has more tree cover today than it did in 1950. I don't, obviously there's no Charles River Watershed Association study from back then or Google Earth, but you know, so I do want to, I guess the final point I'll make, and like I said, I have a whole bunch more, maybe I'll come back up if there's more time, but the final point I want to make is, as a committee, do you, I guess you should be considering if you truly intend for this not to affect a homeowner who is not pulling a construction permit, to repeal the bylaw that already exists that tree work requires a street permit to be pulled. I realize that it's been discussed that it never happens, nobody enforces it, but it is on the books. And if it's on the books, at some point, somebody will enforce it. Maybe not in the current group of people that would be responsible for those things, but and therefore, technically speaking, everything you're discussing affects anybody who wants to cut any tree. So just, you know, despite the assurances that this doesn't affect a homeowner just acting on their own yard, as of right now, it does. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I appreciate it. I'm sorry that as you said, it's a passionate
But-
subject, and mostly because
It's a
I
good
fear
perspective
it's
to
going to
consider.
really limit my ability to do something I've been trying to do for 10 years. And every time I get close, something else, another shoe drops that moves the finish line.
Okay, thank you for your perspective. We appreciate it. Did you have something you want to say?
If I could ask, could you tell us, Rob, how long you've been in your house?
I think it's, let's see, what's this, 2025, 21 years. Oh, no, take that back, 2016, so 19 years.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at some estimates of the value of the, I mean, like those 3 oaks that you have there, there's an estimate that a 24-inch tree in New England with our rainfall patterns can prevent 1,000 to 2,000 gallons of stormwater from going into the stormwater system each year, or somewhere between $80 and $200 per year in stormwater infrastructure costs. So, you know, you multiply that by 3 times 20, and you know, you've been saving the town. Your trees have been doing a lot of good service.
Yeah, and they're not the largest trees in my lot, actually.
They're not your largest trees. Okay.
But they, right.
Yeah.
They,
There are many towns that people do grapple with the problem of how to share the burden of providing public good, you know, which trees are a public good. And there's Tacoma, Washington has a model which targets what the tree cover contribution for every lot ought to be, and then tries to look for payments when you're under that target and credits when you're over the target. It's very hard to administer and so forth, but the committee would like to, you know, tackle the fairness question the best we can. And I wonder if we could use your lot as a case study to at least look at what the impact would be, you know, on someone like yourself.
no,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to discuss that, you know, in a less public
Yeah.
forum, but the, yeah, and as far as this great service my trees are doing, just let me know where to send the bill and I'll have the town,
I know you're looking for more than just appreciation. Yeah.
Yeah. Sir in the back, do you want to, were you standing up to comment?
Bill Zoppo, Precinct F, Nahoyden Street, 330 Nahoyden Street. I rise to, I'm actually against this law, probably the only one in the room. But I see it as another intrusion on property rights. And I see it as another, what I call the home rule, which is given by the state to towns to intensify their rules and regulations. And after 60 years of being in the development business, I've encountered situations where such things as wetlands rules or regulations by certain towns have had all of the identifying, quantifying information eliminated, and they call that home rule. And so tracts were called isolated land subject to flooding, which took me 2 years to get around to develop a project. So I think that it's important that existing property rights are not affected by this rule. If I would like to take a tree down on my property, and I'm not doing any construction, but if I'd like to take a tree down, I think it's an intrusion on my rights. As pointed out, there is a regulation now that could be enforced that I could take that tree down. I have grandchildren that have moved in with me, living in my house, and I took down a couple of trees because they were dropping limbs. They were Norwegian maples they're basically weeds, I'm told by a good friend of mine who managed 1.5 million acres of forest in Maine and northern New York. And so, you know, I should have the right to do that. And I did take them down because I did not want them to get hurt. So I think that right needs to be protected. Now, I also stand here as a senior. And the ADU law, which I think, you know, the size of those units should have been increased. I'm an active senior, and, you know, to live in 900 square feet is a shoebox for a husband and wife. And they should be exempt from this law, and the fact that it would increase the cost. And I'm contemplating this of putting an AD unit on my property so that I can live with my grandchildren and proximity to my grandchildren. And I shouldn't have to have this burden of taking these trees down and planting other trees and all the things that go on. You know, we want to identify trees on other people's property and not allow them to take down. You know, if I need to take down a tree or two in order to put up a space for myself and my wife, I'd like to be able to do that without having that cost incurred. And the fact is CO2. Well, you know, CO2 is making things grow faster. I have a farmer friend that runs a big farm, and he tells me that his crops are growing about 10% faster with climate change. Now, trees are growing, and I've witnessed this in my own yard. I've had to prune my shrubs twice this year in order to cut back because they are growing faster. Now, this is a burden for a senior, for a homeowner to maintain a property as it is. And we're already, in a sense, running seniors out of town with the cost burden. Yes, trees are a benefit, but also affordable living is a benefit for people. You know, and we need to be cognizant of that. And I think that, you know, it's great to have all these ideas and things. But as I say, what tends to happen in my experience of 60 years is that we then take these home rule things as to hold up development. In 1972, my father and I brought a project to Stowe, Vermont, Village on the Green. You can go, it's on the mountain road, it's there now exists. We took it to that town, 1972. Frank DeMilla, who's now, I don't know if he's still alive, but all of those units were sited for solar and the vegetation and everything to buffer the winds and other things. It was purposely designed like that. It took 10 years to get the project. That's how grateful they were for the insights that we had on that. Now, I'll say that that was just 2 years longer than it took me to get the permit to build affordable housing in Needham, which I think is a disgrace. But so I think that the cost and the consideration to the homeowner, to the seniors, and the fact that I own this property and I should have the ability to, you know, work the property as I so fit. So those are my comments. Thank you for listening.
I guess I would say that a couple of those circumstances that you mentioned are conflicts that we are considering, you know, so that we don't want to issue a bylaw that has inherent conflicts in it. So building an ADU, for example, is one of those conflicts that I mentioned early in the program that we need to work on. So I think, you know, and the tree that you took down because it was dropping limbs, I mean, it sounds to me like that tree was dangerous, and there's an exemption for that in the bylaw. So I think a lot of those situations we are cognizant of, we're going to be working on. They're not resolved yet, but we'll see where it gets to. So we hear you. Jean, I'm going to try, I see you back there. I just, I want to try and let people who haven't yet spoken. So Jean, if you want to come on up, you can.
Jean McKnight. I have a comment and 3 questions, and maybe, I don't know, deal with the questions one at a time. The comment is, I'm very pleased to hear that you're carefully considering the impact of the burden on local boards and employees. My memory is that about 4 years ago, the planning board on which I had served for many years, it was considering a tree bylaw. And we were particularly looking at Wellesley, and we investigated, we thought about it, and then we went to the select board to talk it over with the select board. And the concern was the burden on, I think, on Mr. Olson's job and perhaps on the building inspector would be too much. And so that was the end of that effort. But I think a careful, it wasn't really looked into carefully the way it sounds like you're doing it. And I think when you really, people really want to know what the cost burden is to the town, I'm very glad that you're investigating that carefully. Then just a couple of things. When you talk about the look back period, and the look back period is 1 year. How do you figure out that there were trees on the property? Do you use like GPS images, or
Yes.
what's the way of doing that? Is there a way?
Yeah. Right, Ed? Looking at GPS?
Yeah, it's GIS.
GIS.
Not
GIS,
GPS,
that's the
but
word, not
GIS.
GPS.
Right, it's not
Geographic information. And I'll speak to that. It's not exact because we can hunker down and get this, what the species was and an approximate size, but it'll be a guesstimate. Unless there's stumps on that property, we won't have a true measurement. So,
Mhm.
but that's the best we can do. And that's what other communities are doing.
Okay.
Good question.
I kind of figured that, yeah, even though I had the initials wrong. And I had a concern recently about visibility on a corner lot and danger for motor vehicles. And I called the DPW and they listened to me, but nothing has been done yet about the bushes, actually big bushes at the corner of Central Avenue in the Hoyden. But when you said about the tree yard, on corner lots, I think there is a concern about a particular area where you have to be careful what you plant. And how do you regulate both the need for visibility on corner lots and the requirement for preserving and planting within that tree yard, if anybody wants to comment on that.
So I believe there is already a bylaw that prevents obstruction of views on corner lots. So that actually is another good point that we should make sure it doesn't conflict with what we're trying to put in place.
Mhm. You're saying there already is a bylaw?
To prevent obstruction of views on corner lots.
Yes.
So
Okay.
yes, that exists
We
already.
have to coordinate with that,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that
then-
went to the list of conflicts.
Okay. And then my third and last question has to do with, I don't know if the right word is tree berms. I'm talking about the grass strips that are along some of our roads. And I live in a condominium. I live in Rosemary Ridge condominium off Hillside Avenue, which does have a berm, but doesn't really have many trees, if any. When you talk about using the money that you get from the mitigation, does the town or will the town have a plan for planting in these tree berms? So that's my last question.
Sure. Ed, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, those are all some really good questions. So thank you for that conflict, that corner clearance bylaw that Josh mentioned. That does exist, but that is something that has to be considered. So the berm on Rosemary in front of your house is probably about 10 inches at the widest spot. So I
Yeah.
mean, I'd love to plant a tree, but I think it wouldn't do too well in that type of soil pit. But yeah, with the town is a 3-pronged planting program. Our first prong and where we put our energy is setback plantings for front yards. So we've been doing that for 100 years. It's a free program. We try to do 60 or 70 trees of those a year. That was the picture that Kurt and I had from the other day on Warren Street. Secondarily, our second prong is open space. Claxton, we just planted, I think, 77 trees at Claxton. So every year when we do a capital project, we try to get as many trees as possible because we own those spaces. We control the destiny. We try to plan and think about how those spaces will grow for the next 100 years. And you'll see almost every open space in the 15 years I've been here, we've planted out. And there's a reason why we do that, because again, we're trying to prep for the future. Our last prong is berm plantings. Why do I use that as my last prong? Because it's the most toxic of those 3 environments. I try to maximize, I work for the taxpayers, and I try to maximize the investment that you give us. So again, to throw all our investment into trees that probably live a half of their useful life is probably not the best useful investment of the taxpayer money. We do berm plantings. We're very targeted when we do berm plantings. A good example would be Mellon Street that we did last year. Mellon Street's by the backside of Trader Joe's. It's a heat island. We met with the entire neighborhood and said, guys, I would love to plant 40 trees in this neighborhood. what do you say? And they said, wow, let's go, Ed. So we put probably 30 trees in that neighborhood, yard trees, berm trees, and really try to make it a group effort so that we're not one here, one there. We're doing neighborhood plantings like we did at West Street and many other neighborhoods, Warren Street, all over town, but try to do it one neighborhood at a time. So we're not really just wasting our time. We're really maximizing our efforts. And I'll give Gabby a shout out, our sustainability coordinator. Gabby and I are really working at heat islands and trying to combat where do we need these trees the most? Because we know that our staff, we have 4 people. So again, we're not loaded with staff. So we try to really maximize our time and our resources. And that's really our tax strategy right now.
Good. I didn't even realize you had a study and a plan with regard to planting of trees and berms. Thank you.
Yes.
Before we go to the next speaker, Ed, since you're on the heat island and tree planting subject, why don't you talk about the grant that you guys just won?
Can I lean on Gabby I'd like to give all the credit to Gabby, but I don't know if she
Yeah,
has a microphone.
Gabby doesn't have a microphone, so.
Gabby has been instrumental in so many different grants over the past 2 years since she's joined us as a sustainability coordinator. This particular grant was a state grant called the Cooling Corridors Grant, and it was specifically targeted for communities that are trying to push out tree planting in the berm, public space, and especially in heat islands. So Gabby and I put a grant together, or I should say Gabby did most of the legwork. Thank you, Gabby. And you can take it from there, Gabby. Congratulations.
Thanks, Ed. You're very kind. It was a very much team effort. So as Ed said, the grant is for Cooling Corridors, which is a grant program that specifically funds trees that are going to help cool the hottest neighborhoods. So what we did was we got a map of the areas of town that have the highest land surface temperature, and then we overlaid that with our Safe Routes to School sidewalks. So the target is to plant trees in areas that are the warmest in town right now, and then also try to plant those trees in areas where we know those sidewalks are being heavily utilized, in particular by school children who are walking to and from school. So the grant will fund 46 trees. It will cover planting and watering. So it's a 2-year grant. Yeah, we're very excited. It's our first time getting the grant. It was a very competitive program. Only 4 municipalities were awarded this year. So glad we were included.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of trees, but it's $92,000. It's a big grant for this. So very exciting and very proud of our town. Liz.
Well, my name's Elizabeth Caponia, town meeting member for Precinct J. I live on Highland Terrace. And I just realized I've been living here in Needham for 25 years now. It's a long time. And one thing, and I thank you for the good work you're doing with this committee. I wish you had started this committee 20 years ago. The one thing that I have noticed over the years, and it upsets me a lot viscerally, is the amount of trees that I've personally seen cut down, whole swaths of trees in my Precinct J, in my neighborhood, especially when they redid the exits with 128. Where was mitigation for that? And so anyways, one street over from where I live, it's called Riverside Street, and it had, I think, 6 or 7 houses that recently were torn down, along with all the beautiful trees, the bushes, everything. Now, I took this picture. This is like a personalized story. On Thanksgiving Day a few years ago, that's when beautiful trees like that existed, where the homes, the tear downs were. I could see that from my house. And you can see the tree was very, very tall. I had to use 700 millimeter lens to see this. My naked eye could not see the bird. It just looked like a whitish thing. It's a hawk. It's a red-tailed, juvenile red-tailed hawk. And you can see this tree was totally healthy. Look at those beautiful pine cones. It was in its prime and it was so tall and beautiful. So when the tear downs occurred, that tree went with it. The hawk also moved. I heard it moved to Newton across the river. But trees, you know, are not just for humans, but they're for birds, they're for animals. You know, all the things we're listing, all the good things that trees do. So I know we're late in the game, but I sincerely hope that we arrive to a good consensus, especially with this mitigation. It's really needed. Thank you for your good work.
Thanks, Liz. I see that Ellen has her hand up online and I don't see anyone standing up. I think we just lost Dave, unfortunately. So if we want to bring her over, she can make her comment.
Hello again. Thank you for taking the second, some questions, and I just want to reiterate again, how thoughtful this process has been and how enjoyable to listen to. I really want to echo the last speaker, you know, having had those experiences in my own neighborhood. And it's so strange, but I think I have a lot of you beat. I'm over 60 now, and I'm living in the house I grew up in. So, of course, I was away for about 25 years, but my family maintained the house. So it's a long time Needham, and I'm on Greendale Road, and I will say to you what I've said to so many people recently. Back then, Needham, Greendale Ave, my mom said, was a quiet country road. For those of you who know Greendale Ave, especially during the middle of the day, it is not a quiet country road. You know, trees help absorb some of that sound as well as obviously some of the exhaust. Sadly, one of my favorite houses in this neighborhood was just taken down. And as we know, you know, they've built a really high, you know, they built up the dirt, you know, put up and the 2 stories that are now being built, and there's going to be a third and maybe fourth, are higher than the house that used to be there. There is no room for a new tree. I think that a lot of developers are going to go this route. And I'm wondering how the outreach is going to be to developers about that issue. So that's one of my questions. The other question is, as I was mentioning before, even more citizen participation. I would like to make a suggestion, and hopefully I can get a response on this, that a citizens committee be formed, maybe not even the folks on this committee now, but that moving forward, that this be part of the issue, so that there's not too much burden on Ed or Gabby, or you guys sound like you're doing great work, so that the citizens can have a continual say-so with this. And I guess the last thing I'm going to say, once again, echoing the speaker just before me, you know, I heard somebody talk a lot about property rights and rights of the individual, and that is one of our rights, but there's also rights of nature, rights of rivers, rights of future generations. And I think by what you're doing tonight and moving forward, we're thinking of the future generations. Climate crisis is really, really real. They're meeting right down in Brazil now. I guess what, they're 30 now. And lots of island nations are flooding. Needham had climate catastrophic floods. My house was hit 3 times in 5 months. And many others were as well. We had 250 homes and businesses flood. So we can't, I hope that going forward, an ongoing citizens committee would take the next step. The next step being, how do we address, as somebody else said, the existing houses and homeowners, and somebody just like my neighbors willy-nilly wanting to just cut down some trees. I think we have the rights to take care of our land as we see, but at the same time, we have to balance that out with what are we doing to future generations? What are we doing to our next door neighbors with the floods, as we know? What are we doing to the wildlife? What are we doing to a whole bunch of things, and you know, the soil, everything. So I think I'm just going to request that we really, really look at keeping this being like an ongoing committee, and or reforming another committee that sort of surrounds the departments and gives the support, so that maybe we can help make some of those decisions. I've seen it work both ways in various communities, and I think always we do best when there's more citizen participation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks a lot. I do want to just bring everyone's attention to a couple of things. One is that the town of Needham recently passed a stormwater bylaw. Josh is our representative that was ongoing for a couple of years, I think. And it was just passed at town meeting. And so this is a bylaw that will apply to many of the same situations that we're talking about for the tree bylaw. And in fact, will have an impact even on a future municipal building. So for example, if we rebuild Pollard, it would be subject to the stormwater regulations, as will every other new build in town. So there is progress being made. There is actually a large house review committee that is looking at the allowable regulations around house size. And is formulating some potential changes there as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. I think it's important to balance private property rights with community good. And it is for that reason, among others, that we are attempting to address a specific issue here and not have a super broad tree bylaw that will impact all of the situations that exist. It may be that we pass a very targeted bylaw today or in the near future, and then in the future, other committees or potentially a standing committee, as Ellen suggests, makes changes or add additions to a bylaw that would address more situations if the public feels like that's appropriate. But I think the overall feeling, at least my feeling, and I think the feeling of this committee, is that some progress is better than no progress. And we want to start to make some progress in these most egregious of situations, because those egregious situations are the ones that are taking most of the tree canopy. So if we address those, we are addressing, that 80% of the problem. And then we do need to look at all of the issues that have been brought up here tonight and others that exist. But we're not looking to prohibit property owners from taking down dangerous trees or from adding onto their homes. That's not the point. The point is to hopefully address the specific situation of clear cutting as results from new construction, because that's where most of our tree loss is happening. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. When you go, as I know you all will, to the website to sign up for the Notify Me alerts, you can also sign up for alerts on information about that large house committee, because that's clearly going to have an impact here as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments, either from the committee or from the audience, the public?
Ed.
I do too.
We talked about the tree gift fund earlier. So the town does have a donation tree gift revolving fund. I've been here 15 years and there hasn't been many gifts, but here tonight, there's a young lady that gifted the town a beautiful golden larch to the Walker Gordon Field, and it looks incredible. So thank you very much. And one last update, I did talk to Jeannie Goddard the other day from the class of 58 or something like that, and they want to donate all the remaining funds in their trust to the town, to the tree gift fund, to be used for tree planting next spring. So soon I'll be coming to the select board with a gift from a class of old, and I think Jeannie's quite a character, and she said, Ed, we're getting too old to meet, so we want to put the monies towards trees. So I can't thank her enough. So
She and Brooks taught me in high school.
oh my goodness, yeah. So thank you. And we take as many gifts as we can get. Yeah, so thank you. Keep them coming.
This may
Thank
have
you.
been said, but just the reference to the tree gift fund.
Yes.
If that could be publicized.
Yeah.
And more people could know it exists, make it more gifts. So I think that would be a good step.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Fred, do you want to say something?
I wanted to reinforce what Ellen was saying about non-governmental organizing. I mean, really what we're talking about here is an ancient problem of preserving the commons or sustaining a common resource. I mean, we all benefit from our neighbors' trees, right? And in the old days, they had a pasture and everyone could bring their sheep to the pasture. But if you brought too many sheep, the pasture was killed, right? And it turns out Elinor Ostrom has studied this in a book called Sustaining the Commons. And the most successful preservation efforts involve multiple layers of organization, governmental and non-governmental. And there are classic stories, including the Maine fishermen who had what they called harbor gangs. Had nothing to do with the government regulation, but the fishermen got together and they made rules in each harbor, and it was highly effective for many decades. So I encourage people to think about how we can organize on this.
Yeah. And I would say too, that there are a bunch of advocacy groups in town already that exist that you could join or could, work with on any particular issue. So certainly trees is one of them. And I think Green Needham does some great work. I think you probably know of others. But there are governmental and non-governmental groups aplenty to join to advocate for the issue that is closest to your heart. Hopefully it's trees, but potentially lots of other things, including property rights. So something for everyone out there. Absolutely. Do we have any other, I'm just mindful of the time. I know we don't have a huge audience here, but if there is anyone else who would like to speak, we'd love to hear from you. Remember that you can still email as lengthy and as many questions as you want. That email address is otm@needhamma.gov. And that's, anytime for anything, frankly. And I think if there's no other comments, then we'll call it a night and invite you to, watch our incredibly fascinating meetings and to look out for some of the educational opportunities that we mentioned we'll be putting on, but also likely we'll have another one of these when we're further along, and we'll come to you with not only whatever it is that we've formulated, but also some of the questions that were raised here tonight that we couldn't answer because we haven't yet gotten to that work. All right. Thanks, everyone. Board, we have to adjourn our meeting. So if someone would make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, great. And since we're all here, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, fantastic. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.